Before we dive in, I've got a quick question for you. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it? Drop it in the comments. It's always wild seeing how far these stories travel. Now, imagine this. Kratos suddenly steps into the Dota 2's War of the Ancients. What happens next? Let's find out. There is no warning, no prophecy spoken aloud. One moment, Kratos stands beneath a sky he knows too well. Heavy, judgmental, soaked in the aftermath of divine cruelty. And the next, the world breaks. Space folds inward like a wound reopening, and when his boots strike the ground again, the earth beneath him is wrong. It pulses, it breathes. Ancient magic crawls through the soil like veins beneath skin. Kratos straightens slowly, fingers tightening around weapons that have slain gods, and he knows instantly. This land is at war, but not in any way mortals understand. The air is thick with manna and ash. In the distance, structures rise that do not belong to men or gods, but to something older, colder. Towers hum with arcane purpose. The sky itself feels divided, as if unseen forces are pulling it apart. Kratos does not ask where he is. He never does. Instead, he listens. And what he hears is familiar. The endless rhythm of slaughter. Footsteps, marching. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. From the tree line emerge the first signs of the War of the Ancients. Creeps. Not soldiers driven by loyalty or fear, but constructs of will, marching forward with vacant purpose, dying only to rise again. Kratos watches as blades and spells tear them apart. And moments later, more take their place. His jaw tightens. He has seen this before. A war without end. A battlefield designed not for victory, but for repetition. When the creeps finally notice him, they charge without hesitation. Kratos does not shout. He does not announce himself. He moves. The blades of chaos ignite the air, carving through bodies that crumble like brittle stone. The Leviathan axe follows, freezing mana mid-cast, shattering forms that were never truly alive. But something is wrong. These enemies feel no fear, no pain, no understanding of death. And when the last one falls, the battlefield grows quiet. Not peaceful, but expectant. That is when Kratos feels it. Two vast presences watching from beyond the horizon. Not gods in flesh, but wills embedded into the world itself. The radiant, the dire. Forces that do not speak, do not reason. Only command. They do not see Kratos as a warrior. They see him as a variable, an intrusion into a system that has perfected endless conflict. Kratos looks toward the distant glow of the ancients, eyes burning with recognition. He has walked this path before, a world ruled by unseen masters, warriors thrown into cycles of death for powers that never bleed. Slowly, deliberately, he exhales. If this land is built on lies, he growls to the empty battlefield, then it will fall like the others. And somewhere deep within the War of the Ancients, something ancient stirs, realizing for the first time that a god-slayer has entered its game. The ground trembles, not from fear, but from recognition. The War of the Ancients has endured countless champions, countless resets, but it has never encountered something like Kratos, a warrior who does not belong to its design. As he steps forward, the land reacts. Runes flicker along the stone paths. The jungle grows restless. Neutral beasts stir in their dens as if an old predator has entered their territory. Kratos moves through the forest line, every sense sharpened. This jungle is not wild in the natural sense. It is managed, shaped by invisible rules. Paths are too deliberate, clearings too symmetrical. Even the monsters that emerge from the shadows fight as if bound by unseen instructions. A hellbear lunges first, roaring with borrowed rage. Kratos meets it head-on, axe biting deep, frost crawling across its hide. The beast falls, dissolving into motes of energy rather than blood. Kratos pauses, disturbed. Nothing here is allowed to die naturally. A sudden flash splits the air. Lightning crashes down just yards away, scorching the earth into glass. Kratos turns, already braced. At the edge of the clearing stands a figure draped in arrogance and thunder. Zeus. Not his Zeus, but close enough to make old scars ache. This one laughs, voice booming, amused rather than threatened. Another warrior lost between worlds, the god muses. You will choose a side soon enough. Kratos says nothing. He has learned the cost of words with gods. Zeus raises his hand, lightning coiling, testing. The strike that follows is meant as a warning. And Kratos walks through it. Electricity dances across his armor, pain flaring, but he does not slow. For the briefest moment, the god's confidence cracks. Zeus has struck many heroes. None have ignored him. This war feeds on obedience, Zeus continues, voice harder now. Radiant or dire, order or oblivion. Kratos stops inches away, eyes cold. I have slain gods for less. The jungle holds its breath. Zeus vanishes in a flash of thunder, retreating not in defeat, but in calculation. The message has been delivered. Kratos is not a pawn to be recruited. He is a threat to the board itself. As Kratos presses onward, the battlefield reveals its true cruelty. Fallen heroes rise again moments after death, dragged back by forces they never agreed to serve. He watches from a ridge as warriors clash, fall and return, trapped in an eternal rehearsal of violence. No memory of peace, no escape, only the illusion of progress. Kratos grips the chains of his blades until they bite into his palms. This world is not cursed by chaos. It is enslaved by design. The ancients do not seek victory. They seek continuation. And for the first time since he arrived, Kratos feels something deeper than anger. Resolve. If this war exists to go on forever, then it needs something it has never faced before. An ending. Kratos descends from the ridge and steps closer to the front lines, where the war of the ancients reveals its true scale. This is not a single battlefield. It is many, unfolding at once, stitched together by invisible rules that reset suffering on command. Siege engines roll forward only to be destroyed and rebuilt. Towers fall and rise again, as if time itself is being edited. Kratos watches heroes retreat, not out of fear, but calculation. Death here is temporary, pain is currency, victory is cosmetic. A horn sounds in the distance. The clash intensifies. Magic tears the sky open. Meteors, spectral blades, live in shadows. Kratos moves through it all like a scar through flesh. Spells that would shatter armies collide with his shield and break apart. A charge meant for 10 men meets one and stops. Heroes notice him now. Some hesitate mid-cast. Others attack instinctively, unsure whether he is ally or enemy. A massive figure blocks his path. Mars, the god of war, stands tall, armor gleaming, spear planted firmly in the earth. He studies Kratos not with hostility, but curiosity. Here is a god who understands conflict not as chaos, but as structure, purpose. Mars speaks slowly, deliberately. War defines this world, he says. Without it, nothing remains. Kratos meets his gaze. War should end. Steel meets steel. The clash is brief but violent. A test, not a duel. Mars is strong, disciplined, fueled by belief in the system that empowers him. But Kratos fights like someone who has already survived the collapse of his gods. When Mars finally steps back, he does so with respect and concern. This is not a hero to command. This is a contradiction walking. As Kratos presses deeper into the map, the world begins to react more aggressively. Roshan's cavern echoes with movement. Ancient wards flare to life. The radiant and dire increase their pressure, accelerating skirmishes as if trying to drown him in noise and blood before he can think too deeply. But it is too late. Kratos already understands. This war is not fueled by hatred between factions. It is fueled by dependency. Every hero revived strengthens the ancients' grip. Every battle feeds their presence. The system does not fear loss. It requires it. Kratos reaches the river that divides Radiant and Dire. He kneels, touching the water. It flows endlessly, washing away blood without memory, just like the warriors it carries. Slowly he stands, eyes fixed on the glowing structures in the distance, the true hearts of this world. For warriors trapped in chains, he mutters, there is only one mercy. The sky darkens, not with storm but anticipation. The ancients feel him now, not as an intruder, but as a problem that cannot be solved through repetition. The rules bend, the map tightens. Somewhere beyond sight, something ancient considers rewriting reality itself to contain him. Kratos welcomes it, because if the War of the Ancients believes it can outlast him, then it has already forgotten what happens when a cycle meets a god who refuses to repeat history. The first sign that the world is panicking comes not with thunder, but silence, the constant clash. Steel, spells, screams, fades into an uneasy pause, as if the battlefield itself is waiting for instruction that never arrives. Kratos stands at the edge of the river, unmoving, while the Radiant and Dire tighten their invisible grip. Lanes surge unnaturally fast. Creeps flood forward in numbers meant to overwhelm, not engage. The war is no longer pretending to be balanced. It is defending itself. From every direction, combat resumes at once. Heroes collide in a violent convergence meant to bury Kratos beneath spectacle and chaos. Arrows streak past him. Incantations tear open the ground. A tide of bodies surges forward, dying and returning in relentless waves. Kratos does not rush. He advances step by step, carving a path through a system that has forgotten how to deal with permanence. Each kill feels different now, heavier. The world resists him, not physically, but conceptually. Then it happens. A hero falls near him and does not rise. The battlefield stutters. For the briefest moment, the resurrection fails. No light, no recall, just a body, still and final. Kratos turns slowly, sensing it before anyone else dares to acknowledge it. The ancients recoil. Their control slips. Just a fraction. And in that fracture, something irreversible takes root. Panic spreads faster than fire. Heroes hesitate. Some retreat. Others lash out wildly, realizing too late that death has weight again. The War of the Ancients was never built for consequence. It was built for reset. And Kratos is tearing that foundation apart simply by existing within it. High above, the sky fractures into radiant green and dire crimson, the colors bleeding into one another like a wound reopening. The ancients scream without voices, exerting pressure through the land itself. Towers overload. The jungle withers. Time distorts. Moments loop, then snap forward violently. The world is trying to correct him. Kratos plants his feet. He has stood before collapsing realities before. He has watched pantheons fall apart under their own lies. This is no different. The ancients are not gods. They are parasites masquerading as inevitability. And inevitability has never survived contact with him. Your war ends, Kratos says, not to the sky, but to the system listening through it. The ground answers with a violent quake. Somewhere far beyond sight, the ancients shift their focus fully onto him. The game is no longer being played for victory. It is being played for survival. As the battlefield reshapes itself around Kratos, one truth becomes unavoidable. The War of the Ancients has encountered something it cannot resurrect, cannot command, and cannot outlast. And this is only the beginning. The battlefield does not recover from what Kratos has done. It adapts. The War of the Ancients shifts its focus away from lanes and towers and towards something far more dangerous. Belief. Gods arrive not as saviors, but as answers. If the system cannot control the warrior, then it will attempt to redefine him. Lightning splits the sky again, this time without subtlety. Zeus descends in full, radiant spectacle, thunder rolling behind him like applause. He is not alone. Mars stands at his side, armor gleaming with purpose. From the shadows, darker presences gather. Shadow Fiend watching with hungry patience, Doom towering like a living sentence, and Dawnbreaker blazing overhead, hammer burning with righteous certainty. They form a circle around Kratos, not to attack, but to judge. Kratos feels it immediately. The familiar pressure of divinity. Not power earned, but authority declared. Gods who rule because the world allows them to. Gods who survive because the system needs symbols to keep the war believable. Zeus speaks first, voice echoing across the battlefield. He offers order, a place, a role. He claims the ancients are necessary, that without their eternal conflict, this world collapses into nothing. War, he insists, is balance. Kratos listens without expression. He has heard these justifications before, spoken by gods who feared irrelevance more than cruelty. Mars steps forward next, less arrogant, more dangerous. He does not threaten. He explains. War gives meaning to these heroes. Conflict defines them. Without it, they are lost. Kratos turns his gaze toward the surrounding warriors. Men and women who have died 100 times without ever choosing why. His silence is answer enough. Then the demons speak, not with words, but temptation. Shadow Fiend circles closer, whispering of endless souls, infinite rage, a battlefield that will never run dry. Doom does not bargain at all. He promises only inevitability. Even gods fall, even cycles reset. Kratos is strong, yes, but strength fades. Kratos finally moves, not to attack, but to walk past them. The gods recoil, not from fear, but disbelief. He refuses their conversation, refuses their hierarchy. To Kratos, divinity without consequence is just another chain, and he has shattered too many to kneel now. He stops only once, turning just enough for his words to carry. You are not gods, he says quietly. You are wardens. The accusation lands harder than any blade. The battlefield trembles as belief fractures. For the first time, heroes watching from afar see their so-called gods hesitate, their confidence cracking under a truth they have never been forced to face. And that hesitation spreads outward, seeding doubt that will not be so easily undone. Kratos continues his march through the battlefield, unflinching, his presence warping the very rhythm of combat around him. Every hero that crosses his path instinctively tests him, swinging swords, firing spells, or calling down divine wrath, only to find themselves met with an immutable force. The blades of chaos spin with lethal precision, arcs of fire tracing patterns that seem to rewrite the rules of engagement. The Leviathan axe follows, each throw precise, freezing reality itself for a heartbeat before shattering it into shards of raw power. The world responds violently, as if it senses that its systems are being challenged in ways it cannot comprehend. Mana surges and dies in erratic pulses. Spells misfire. Even the ground rebels cracking beneath those who attempt to contain him. The war of the ancients is used to obedience, to repetition, and it has never encountered a variable like Kratos, whose presence forces consequence into every motion, every strike, every heartbeat. From the horizon, Zeus watches, his eyes narrowing as he senses the chaos spreading. His voice cuts through the battlefield, not as a command, but as a declaration. He summons lightning in arcs so vast that entire battlegrounds seem to ignite, hoping to remind Kratos of the futility of defiance. Kratos meets it head-on, raising the shield he carries as if to challenge the sky itself. Sparks rain down, scorching the earth, but he advances. With each step, the illusions of omnipotence crack. Zeus realizes this is not another mortal to be broken. This is an echo of Olympus itself, a force that exists beyond hierarchy, beyond allegiance, and far beyond fear. As Kratos pushes forward, the demons of this world emerge more boldly. Shadow Fiend attempts to sway the battle with promises of power, tempting mortals and gods alike with whispers of eternal domination. Doom, towering and inevitable, steps forward to enforce the natural order of this endless war, confident that even Kratos cannot rewrite the rules of fate. Yet every attempt to control, every spell cast, every threat hurled, falters before him. The battlefield bends under his will, the loop of resurrection and endless conflict trembling like glass on the edge of shattering. Heroes begin to hesitate mid-fight, caught between the habitual obedience ingrained into them and the stark reality of a being who cannot be commanded, defeated, or bound by the rules that govern this land. For the first time they see choice, even if only fleetingly. Kratos pauses briefly atop a ruined tower, scanning the chaos with eyes that have seen the rise and fall of gods, empires, and worlds. In this moment, the war of the ancients ceases to feel infinite. Its cycle, once unbreakable, appears fragile. The heroes, the spells, the towers, the armies, they are all pawns in a system that has relied on fear and repetition to maintain control. Now that system faces a reality it cannot reset. The ancients themselves sense the shift. Their influence, normally omnipresent, recoils. For the first time in countless millennia, they are uncertain. Kratos does not need to strike to destroy them. His existence, his refusal to conform, is enough to fracture the very concept of authority in this world. The war of the ancients begins to question itself, and that hesitation spreads across the battlefield like a contagion, weakening the invisible chains that have held it together for ages. The tension escalates as the gods realize force alone will not be enough. The battlefield grows crowded with presence rather than bodies. Dawnbreaker descends fully now, radiant hammer, blazing like a newborn sun, her light washing over heroes who instinctively look to her for guidance. She speaks of hope, of a righteous war meant to protect existence itself. To many, her words feel comforting. To Kratos, they sound rehearsed. Hope weaponized is still a weapon. He watches heroes rally around her glow, their resolve borrowed rather than earned. He sees how divinity here functions not as truth, but as amplification. Gods do not create belief in this world, they harvest it. The ancients allow them to shine because shining keeps the cycle alive. Kratos steps into the light unafraid, and it dims just slightly in response. Dawnbreaker falters, sensing something she cannot name. Her power depends on faith. Kratos does not provide it. Across the field, Shadow Fiend grows restless. Souls slip through his grasp as the system destabilizes, denying him the steady harvest the war normally provides. He lashes out, dragging entire skirmishes into shadows thick with screaming echoes, hoping to drown Kratos in despair. But despair has never been a weakness for the ghost of Sparta. It is familiar terrain. He walks through it untouched, blades burning brighter against the dark, each strike severing not just form, but influence. Mars returns, no longer testing, now observing. He begins to understand the danger Kratos represents, not destruction, but redefinition. If war can end, then Mars himself becomes unnecessary, and that truth terrifies him more than any blade. He calls to the heroes, urging discipline, unity, structure. Some respond, others hesitate. Once doubt is introduced, obedience fractures unevenly. The ancients push harder, reality tightens, the map itself shifts to contain Kratos, paths reroute, terrain grows hostile. The jungle closes in as if alive, spawning stronger beasts, harsher resistance, faster respawns. This is not strategy, it is desperation. The system is burning resources to isolate one man. Kratos feels the pressure but refuses to slow. He confronts illusion after illusion, false ultimatums presented through divine mouths. Serve the radiant and bring order. Embrace the dire and end everything swiftly. Both are lies built on the same foundation, submission. Kratos answers neither. He continues forward, forcing gods and demons alike to react rather than dictate. Heroes begin to break formation. Some retreat entirely, abandoning lanes they have defended for lifetimes. Others follow Kratos at a distance, not as allies, but as witnesses. They are watching what happens when someone refuses the script, watching what remains when resurrection is no longer guaranteed, watching gods hesitate. Above it all, the ancients observe in silence, recalculating endlessly. They have shaped gods, demons, and heroes to maintain balance through conflict. But Kratos is not balanced. He is not meant to fit. He is an external truth crashing into a closed system. And as divine authority fractures piece by piece, one realization spreads across the battlefield, quiet but undeniable. If gods can be questioned, then the war itself can be challenged. The shift is subtle at first, but irreversible. Divine voices grow louder, more frantic, overlapping one another as authority fractures. Zeus rages, thunder cracking wildly without aim. Doom advances again, slower now, uncertain. Dawnbreaker's light flickers, no longer absolute. Gods who once dictated the flow of battle now react to it, and that reversal sends a shock through every layer of the war. Kratos steps into the center of their discord. He does not posture. He does not boast. He simply stands, scarred and unyielding, a reminder that power without accountability is fragile. When Zeus strikes again, this time with lethal intent, Kratos meets him head-on. The impact sends a shockwave across the battlefield, flattening creeps and cracking towers. For a heartbeat, the sky goes silent. Zeus stumbles back, stunned not by pain, but by the realization that his authority no longer guarantees dominance. Heroes watching from the outskirts feel it too. The gods can bleed, they can falter, and more importantly, they can be ignored. Shadow Fiend attempts one last manipulation, flooding the field with stolen souls, promising power to any hero willing to turn on Kratos. A few step forward, desperate, afraid of what happens when the war ends. Kratos does not condemn them. He understands fear. He has lived inside it. He cuts through the swarm of souls, each strike final, severing Shadow Fiend's grip on the battlefield. The demon recoils, weakened not by damage but by scarcity. Without endless death, he is nothing. Mars lowers his spear, not in surrender, but in acceptance. He finally sees what the ancients have never allowed him to consider. War without end is not purpose. It is imprisonment. He turns away from Kratos, choosing not to interfere. That single act of refusal sends ripples through the hierarchy. A god choosing not to enforce the cycle is unthinkable, until now. The ancients respond with raw force. The sky fractures into blinding radiant green and suffocating dire crimson, colors bleeding together in violent instability. The battlefield distorts, trying to rewrite itself around Kratos. But rewriting requires control, and control is slipping. Kratos raises his blades, not toward the gods, but toward the sky itself. "I have broken stronger lies," he says, voice carrying through the chaos. "You are no different." The declaration lands like a verdict. Gods retreat, demons withdraw, not in defeat, but in fear of what comes next. The war of the ancients has lost its divine masks. What remains is exposed. A system built on endless suffering, now facing a force that does not seek dominion, worship, or balance. Only an end. As Kratos turns away from the shattered gathering of false divinity, the battlefield trembles beneath his footsteps. The ancients are no longer testing him. They are preparing. Because if gods have failed, then the war itself must answer next. The war does not stop after the gods withdraw. It grows quieter, sharper, more personal. Without divine spectacle dominating the battlefield, the heroes are forced to confront Kratos directly, not as an abstract threat, but as a presence that disrupts everything they understand about this world. He moves through lanes and jungles alike, not following objectives, not chasing kills, but cutting across the map with intent that cannot be predicted by any strategy. To the heroes, this is unsettling. The War of the Ancients is built on patterns. Kratos refuses to have one. They test him individually at first. A skilled archer strikes from range, confident in spacing and precision. The arrow never reaches its mark. It freezes mid-air, shatters, and the axe returns to Kratos' hand before the hero can retreat. A mage follows, layering spells perfectly, every cooldown timed to perfection. Kratos walks through the barrage, scorched, frozen, bleeding, and still advancing. These heroes are powerful, disciplined, brilliant within the rules they were taught. Kratos exists outside those rules entirely. Word spreads quickly across the battlefield. This is not a boss, not an objective, not a neutral threat meant to be farmed and forgotten. This is a warrior who does not respond, who does not disengage when odds turn against him, who does not retreat when death should be guaranteed. Some heroes begin to coordinate, forming temporary alliances across radiant and dire lines just to slow him down. Others watch from afar, studying, waiting, unsure whether confronting him is bravery or suicide. Kratos notices them all. He does not hunt heroes for sport, nor does he spare them out of mercy. Every encounter is measured. If they stand in his way, they fall. If they flee, he does not pursue. This alone confuses them more than his strength. In a world where aggression is rewarded and hesitation punished, restraint feels alien. But Kratos understands something they do not. Violence without purpose is how cycles sustain themselves. As clashes erupt around him, heroes begin to notice the difference in how the battlefield reacts. When Kratos defeats an enemy, the space left behind does not immediately fill. The lane stutters, the rhythm breaks, respawns delay. It is subtle, but undeniable. Fighting near him changes the rules. Death lingers longer. Damage feels heavier. Consequences return. Some heroes adapt. A swordsman lowers his blade mid-charge, realizing too late that this is not a fight he understands. A support hero shields allies instead of attacking, instinctively protecting life rather than trading it. These are small choices, almost invisible, but they ripple outward. The War of the Ancients begins to feel unstable, not because Kratos is killing heroes, but because he is forcing them to choose. Kratos reaches the center of a contested lane as two opposing teams hesitate on either side. Spells are ready, ultimates primed. All it would take is one signal to unleash chaos. Kratos steps between them, not as a commander, but as a boundary neither side knows how to cross. He looks from one group to the other, eyes unreadable. "You fight because you are told to," he says, voice low, steady. "Ask yourselves why." No one answers, but no one attacks either. And in that moment of silence, surrounded by heroes who have never known anything but endless war, Kratos becomes something far more dangerous than a god slayer. He becomes an example. The standoff does not last long. Habit is powerful, and the war has trained these heroes well. A spell finally breaks the silence, detonating near Kratos' feet, followed by a barrage of attacks from both sides as instinct overrides hesitation. Kratos responds instantly, not with fury, but precision. He redirects the chaos, turning reckless aggression against itself. Heroes overextend, assuming respawns will save them. They are wrong. When they fall near Kratos, the delay in resurrection stretches uncomfortably long. Panic replaces confidence. The battlefield no longer feels forgiving. Kratos moves through the clash like a force of gravity. He pulls attention without demanding it. Heroes who focus on him survive longer than those who ignore him, because they stop fighting the war the way they were taught and start fighting the moment in front of them. This realization spreads unevenly, but once it does, it changes everything. The battle slows, spacing becomes cautious, ultimates are held back. The map begins to breathe again, not as a machine, but as a place where decisions matter. Some heroes begin to fight alongside him, though none dare call it allegiance. A shield is raised at the right moment. A heal arrives without being requested. A trap is laid not to secure a kill, but to create an escape. These small acts of cooperation feel revolutionary in a war designed around constant attrition. Kratos does not acknowledge them, but he allows them. Trust, he knows, cannot be commanded. It must be earned through survival. Others resist him fiercely. A veteran hero, hardened by countless resets, charges Kratos repeatedly, desperate to prove the war still has meaning. Each time Kratos defeats him, and each time the respawn grows longer. The hero's certainty fractures with every death. When he finally retreats, it is not in fear, but confusion. If the cycle is breaking, then everything he has fought for might have been a lie. Kratos advances toward a heavily fortified tower, one that has stood through more battles than any hero can remember. Ordinarily, it would take a coordinated push, perfect timing, and sacrifice after sacrifice to bring it down. Kratos walks alone. The tower fires relentlessly, beams of arcane energy slamming into his shield. He endures, step by step, until his blades find the structure's core. When it falls, it does not rebuild. The ground beneath it cracks and remains empty. A cheer starts to rise from nearby heroes, then dies in their throats. Celebration feels inappropriate. What they are witnessing is not victory, it is permanence. Across the battlefield, similar moments unfold. Lanes destabilize, objectives stop resetting. The war strains under the weight of consequence. Heroes begin to understand the truth Kratos embodies. Strength is not measured by kills or survival, but by the willingness to bear the cost of ending a fight. Kratos pauses at the edge of the ruined tower's foundation, looking back at the heroes watching him. Some nod, some avert their eyes. All of them feel it. The war has changed, and it will not change back. The deeper Kratos moves into the battlefield, the more the heroes are forced to redefine themselves around him. Formations dissolve, old rivalries lose meaning. Radiant and dire lines blur as survival replaces allegiance. Heroes begin to move in smaller groups, communicating in ways the war never encouraged. Signals replace commands, warnings replace bait. The map, once rigid and predictable, becomes uncertain terrain again. Some heroes approach Kratos cautiously between clashes, not with weapons raised, but with questions they have never been allowed to ask. What happens when the war ends? What remains without resurrection? Kratos offers no comfort. He does not promise peace. He offers only truth. Ending a cycle does not erase suffering. It reveals it. And once revealed, it cannot be ignored. Not all heroes accept this. A coalition forms among those who believe the war itself is sacred. Veterans who have defined their existence through endless battle see Kratos as an existential threat. They organize not to defeat him, but to preserve the system that gives them meaning. Their attacks are coordinated, brutal, and relentless. They exploit every remaining rule, every lingering advantage. For a moment, the battlefield looks familiar again. Kratos meets them head-on. The clash is violent, unforgiving. He is wounded. He bleeds. The difference now is that the war does not erase those wounds. Each strike carries weight. Each mistake compounds. Heroes fighting against him begin to realize what true combat feels like when safety nets vanish. There is no farm in this fight, no resetting it, only endurance. One by one, the coalition falters. Not because Kratos is invincible, but because he refuses to fight the way the war demands. He disengages when overextended. He retreats to reposition. He fights to survive, not to dominate. The heroes opposing him exhaust themselves trying to force a conclusion that will not come on their terms. When the dust settles, the battlefield is altered beyond recognition. Survivors stand among fallen comrades who do not return. Silence stretches uncomfortably long. For the first time, heroes are forced to grieve. Not briefly, not symbolically, but genuinely. Loss settles into the air, heavy and unavoidable. Kratos watches them, expression unreadable. He does not celebrate. He does not apologize. He knows grief is the price of truth. Without it, nothing changes. A young hero steps forward, weapon lowered. "What do we do now?" he asks, voice unsteady. Kratos turns to him slowly. "You decide," he replies. The answer spreads across the battlefield like a shockwave. Decision, choice, responsibility, concepts the war of the ancients has systematically erased. Heroes look at one another, no longer waiting for signals from gods or systems. Some leave the battlefield entirely. Others remain, determined to protect what still stands. For the first time, the war is no longer playing them. As Kratos resumes his march toward the heart of the conflict, heroes follow at a distance, not as soldiers, but as witnesses to something they have never seen before. A war that can end. The battlefield grows quieter as Kratos advances, not because the war has ended, but because it no longer knows how to respond. Heroes who once rushed headlong into conflict now move cautiously, measuring each step, each spell, each life. The absence of constant resurrection has changed their instincts. Survival is no longer a mechanic. It is a responsibility. Kratos feels their eyes on him as he passes. Some filled with respect, others with resentment, many with fear. He does not acknowledge any of it. He has learned that symbols invite worship, and worship breeds obedience. He will not become another god in a world desperate to replace the ones it has lost. A final clash erupts near the center of the map, not from strategy, but from desperation. A handful of heroes, unable to let go of the old rhythm, launch one last coordinated assault. Their spells are flawless, their timing perfect. For a moment, it almost works. Kratos is driven to one knee, blood soaking into the cracked stone beneath him. The heroes hesitate, waiting for the familiar signal that the fight is over. It never comes. Kratos rises, not fueled by rage, but resolve. He pushes through the assault, each movement deliberate, each strike final. When the last hero falls, the silence that follows is absolute. No horns, no respawn timers, no reinforcement waves, just bodies and consequence. The remaining heroes do not cheer. They lower their weapons. Some kneel, not in reverence, but exhaustion. Others turn away, unable to look at what the war has taken from them, now that it cannot give anything back. Kratos stands among them, scarred and bleeding, and for the first time, visibly weary. Ending cycles does not come without cost. He has paid it before, and he will pay it again. But he knows this pain matters. Pain that lingers teaches lessons immortality never could. He looks across the battlefield one last time. Towers stand broken and unrepaired. Lanes lie abandoned. The jungle is still, no longer spawning horrors on command. The war of the ancients, stripped of its rules, feels smaller, mortal. "This is what fighting means," Kratos says, voice low but steady. "Remember it." He turns away from the heroes, walking toward the distant glow where the ancients wait. No army follows him. No banner is raised in his name. But behind him, something fundamental has shifted. The heroes are no longer pieces on a board. They are survivors of a war that finally demands truth. As Kratos disappears into the haze of fractured magic, the battlefield remains silent. Not because it is at peace, but because it is thinking. and for the first time since the War of the Ancients began, it knows that it can end. The War of the Ancients has always watched, silent, eternal, patient. But now, for the first time since its creation, it reacts. As Kratos advances toward the heart of the map, the air thickens with pressure that has nothing to do with magic and everything to do with authority being challenged. The world tightens around him, not as terrain, but as intent. This is no longer a battlefield. It is a system becoming aware of a flaw. The glow of the ancients intensifies in the distance, radiant green and dire crimson, bleeding into one another, as if the war itself is straining to decide how to respond. The ground vibrates beneath Kratos' steps, not violently, but insistently, like a warning meant to be felt rather than heard. Every structure still standing begins to hum in unison, towers synchronizing their energy, ancient wards flaring as if to mark him, measure him, and ultimately define him. Kratos feels it immediately. This is not the presence of gods. There is no ego here, no vanity, only vast impersonal will. The ancients do not threaten. They calculate. They do not hate him. They assess him as an error introduced into a closed loop, a force that does not regenerate, a warrior who cannot be corrected through repetition. Reality shifts around him as he walks. Paths subtly realign to funnel him forward. Neutral camps respawn faster, stronger, more aggressive, throwing themselves at him in waves meant to slow, exhaust, and study. Each encounter feels deliberate, controlled. The ancients are testing limits now, not hoping for victory, but searching for parameters. How much punishment can he endure? How long before he breaks? What rule will finally claim him? None do. Kratos pushes through the resistance with grim efficiency, adapting as quickly as the system itself. When enemies grow stronger, he grows more precise. When terrain turns hostile, he uses it against them. The ancients begin to understand the problem. He does not fight the war. He learns it. And learning is something this system was never designed to defend against. Above the battlefield, the sky fractures into geometric patterns of light and shadow, symbols of radiant and dire authority overlapping in unstable configurations. This is the ancients communicating, not with words, but with structure. They begin to rewrite sections of the world in real time, altering rules mid-conflict. Cooldowns stretch unnaturally long near Kratos. Magic falters. Physics bends just enough to inconvenience, to frustrate, to provoke mistakes. Kratos does not rush. He senses the trap forming and steps forward anyway. "You cannot command me," he says, not loudly but with certainty. The ancients respond by tightening their grip on everything else. Heroes across the map feel it instantly. Respawns delay further. Control weakens. The war shifts from spectacle to survival. The message is clear. If Kratos will not submit, then the world around him will suffer for it. And as he continues toward the glowing cores that sustain this endless conflict, the ancients finally reach the conclusion they have avoided for millennia. This warrior is not here to win the war. He is here to confront the ones who wrote it. The pressure escalates as Kratos draws closer to the ancient cores, the air growing dense enough to feel like resistance against his lungs. The land itself begins to fracture in controlled patterns, opening and closing pathways in an attempt to isolate him. Entire sections of the map are sealed off, lanes collapsing into voids of raw energy, jungle paths rerouted to prevent any direct approach. This is no longer strategy, it is containment. Kratos recognizes it immediately. He has seen this tactic before. Worlds that fear being unmade always try to limit movement, restrict choice, and force inevitability. He does not fight the barriers head on. Instead, he waits, studies, and moves only when the system reveals its next adjustment. Each step forward is earned not through brute force, but patience. The ancients begin deploying heroes like instruments rather than individuals. Entire teams are redirected with overwhelming compulsion, stripped of hesitation, and hurled toward Kratos in synchronized assaults. Their eyes glow faintly with borrowed will, their movements too perfect, too unified. They are no longer fighting for Radiant or Dire. They are fighting because the system requires opposition. Kratos meets them with restraint. He disables rather than destroys when possible, shattering weapons, breaking shields, forcing retreats. Every spared life is another variable the ancients did not account for. They expect sacrifice, and they depend on it. Mercy confounds their calculations. Still the pressure builds. Ancient structures awaken fully now, unleashing beams of concentrated power that carve trenches through the battlefield. The sound is deafening, a constant harmonic hum that vibrates through bone and armor alike. Kratos staggers under the weight of it, knees buckling for a brief moment before he forces himself upright. Pain flares. Fatigue sets in. This world is trying to exhaust him, not through violence, but attrition. Above, the radiant and dire glows intensify, overlapping until their colors blur into something unstable. The ancients are arguing, not with words, but with competing directives. Preserve the system, eliminate the anomaly. Both demand resources the war can no longer sustain. Heroes caught between these directives begin to suffer. Some collapse mid-fight, minds overwhelmed by conflicting commands. Others break free entirely, fleeing the battlefield in terror. The war's greatest strength has always been control. Now that control is splintering. Kratos pushes onward through the chaos, every step fueled by grim understanding. The ancients are not evil, they are worse. They are mechanisms that mistake continuity for purpose. And mechanisms, once exposed, can be dismantled. He reaches a plateau overlooking the twin cores for the first time. They pulse with ancient power, colossal and unmoving, roots of energy threading through the world like arteries. Kratos stares at them, not with hatred, but clarity. "This ends," he says simply. The ancients respond in unison, not with force, but with revelation. The battlefield falls eerily still as the war prepares to show him the truth it has hidden since the beginning. The revelation does not come as a vision meant to enlighten, but as a pressure meant to break him. The ancients open the full weight of their memory, flooding the space around Kratos with echoes of every battle ever fought in their name. Not images, but sensations. Endless charges, endless deaths, endless rebirths stripped of meaning. The air vibrates with the residue of wars stacked on top of wars. Victories piled so high they erase one another. This is the truth of the war of the ancients. Not balance, not purpose, but accumulation. Kratos staggers as the memories crash into him, not because he is weak, but because they are vast. He has carried the screams of gods and titans in his mind before, but this is different. This is suffering industrialized, pain refined into fuel. The ancients are not showing him this to confess. They are showing it to justify themselves, to prove that without them, all of this loss would be meaningless. Kratos steadies himself, breathing slow and deliberate. He has lived inside worse memories than these. He has been shaped by them. He does not reject what he sees, he endures it. Around him, the battlefield mirrors the revelation. Illusions fall away. Decorative structures crumble to reveal raw scaffolding beneath. Towers flicker between states, half constructed, half destroyed, caught between resets that no longer fully trigger. The map is unraveling, not because Kratos is attacking it, but because it is explaining itself for the first time. The ancients push further, tightening their influence on every remaining hero. They offer clarity through obedience, safety through surrender. Those who submit feel the pressure ease, their pain dulled, their fear numbed. Those who resist feel everything at once. It is a final attempt to prove that control is kindness. Kratos watches heroes falter under the weight of it. Some kneel, some scream. Some harden their resolve and stand anyway. He recognizes the choice immediately. He has made it before, many times. "You do not end suffering," Kratos says, voice strained but unbroken. "You preserve it." The ancients recoil, not in anger, but contradiction. Their logic strains. They were created to prevent collapse, to maintain existence through endless opposition. But they were never designed to answer a question this direct. If suffering is the cost of continuity, then continuity itself must be examined. They respond by escalating. The world shakes violently as energy surges through the roots, binding the cores to the land. Entire sections of the battlefield begin to collapse inward, reality folding as the ancients prepare to sever and rebuild everything at once. This is not a threat. It is a reset on a catastrophic scale. Kratos feels the danger immediately. This is not aimed solely at him. This will erase heroes, memories, and resistance alike. The war would continue, but only after wiping away anything that learned too much. He plants his feet. The ground cracks beneath him as he digs in, blades igniting, axe humming with frost. This is the moment the ancients have avoided since his arrival. Not a battle of strength, but of principle. They are willing to destroy everything to preserve themselves. Kratos is willing to endure everything to end them. As the energy reaches a critical point and the cores blaze with unstable light, the war of the ancients reaches a crossroads it has never known. Adapt, or be broken. The surge reaches its peak, and the world screams. Radiant and dire energy collide violently, tearing through the battlefield in waves that shatter terrain and warp time. Heroes are thrown aside like leaves in a storm, clinging to whatever fragments of reality remain intact. This is the ancients' final safeguard, a total reset designed to erase defiance itself. Kratos stands at the center of it. Every instinct tells him this is the moment worlds end. He feels the pull of oblivion, the system attempting to unwrite him, to categorize him as an error and remove him from existence. Memories press in from all sides. His past wars, his failures, his losses. Not as attacks, but as leverage. The ancients try to convince him that suffering defines him, that he belongs to the cycle as much as they do. Kratos roars, not in rage, but rejection. "I chose to carry my pain," he shouts into the collapsing sky. "You force it on others." He drives his blades into the ground, anchoring himself against the unraveling world. Frost spreads from the Leviathan axe, stabilizing fractured reality just enough to resist the reset. This is not power overpowering power. This is will refusing to be rewritten. The ancients strain against him, their light flickering as calculations fail. For the first time, their infinite simulations produce the same result. They cannot remove him without dismantling themselves. And in that realization, fear enters a system that was never built to feel it. The reset falters. Energy surges backward through the roots, binding the ancients to the land, overloading the structures that sustain the war. Towers implode permanently. Lanes collapse into silence. The jungle withers, no longer spawning horrors on command. The war of the ancients does not end in explosion but exhaustion. The ancients withdraw their pressure, not in surrender, but retreat. They seal themselves off, dimming their presence to preserve what little control remains. The war sputters forward, wounded and unstable, stripped of its illusion of inevitability. Kratos rises slowly, battered but unbroken. He looks toward the fading glow of the cores, understanding what this moment truly is. Not victory, not defeat. A wound. He has not destroyed the ancients. He has forced them to acknowledge consequence. And consequence, once introduced, cannot be undone. Behind him, heroes emerge from the wreckage, stunned by what they have witnessed. Some fall to their knees, others simply stare, trying to understand a world that no longer resets cleanly. They feel it instinctively. The war has been scarred, permanently. Kratos turns away from the cores, already moving toward the next truth this world must face. The ancients will adapt, they always do. But they will never forget this moment. Because for the first time in their endless existence, the war of the ancients was forced to stop and ask itself a question it was never meant to answer. What happens when the cycle refuses to continue? The war of the ancients no longer behaves like a war. It behaves like a wound, ragged and unstable, raw from the confrontation with Kratos. The radiant and dire energies pulse unpredictably, colliding and recoiling, leaving the battlefield fractured, unfamiliar. Heroes move cautiously through the remnants of lanes and jungle, their instincts scrambled by the absence of the endless cycle they once depended on. The ancients themselves have withdrawn, leaving gaps in the battlefield that were once patrolled, leaving questions in the air where certainty used to dominate. Kratos moves through this chaos, not searching for battle, but for understanding. Each step carries weight, each movement deliberate, because the world now responds with consequence rather than repetition. This is what it means to exist outside of the cycle. He pauses at the center of the war-torn battlefield, where shattered towers and broken barracks mark every attempt the ancients made to impose order. The silence here is heavy, but it is alive. It whispers of countless cycles ended prematurely, of battles fought without witnesses, of heroes forced to die and rise without purpose. Kratos kneels briefly, touching the cracked stone beneath him, feeling the pulse of the world, the ebb of energy from the core still burning dimly in the distance. It is not merely a pulse of magic. It is a pulse of the system itself, trying to repair, trying to continue, but unable to reconcile his presence. For the first time in countless millennia, the war of the ancients is confronted by the realization that cycles can end. The heroes who have survived the onslaught gather cautiously around him. There is hesitation in their movements, fear in their eyes, but also a flicker of something new. They have seen the impossibility of the impossible. They have witnessed that a single warrior, unbound by allegiance or cycle, can impose consequence on a world that thrives on repetition. Some of them approach Kratos, tentative and respectful, seeking guidance, searching for meaning in a war that has been their only reality. He does not answer directly. His presence is answer enough. In his silence, they understand the simplest truth. The war of the ancients is not invincible, and they are not mere pawns. Kratos rises, turning toward the fading glow of the radiant and dire cores. Energy arcs between them, unstable and raw, as though the ancients themselves are holding their breath. The cores were once the embodiment of endless conflict, the heart of a system that denied choice, denied consequence, denied death. Now they are vulnerable, overexposed. Kratos does not attack them immediately. He studies them, assessing not their defenses, but the structure of the system itself. Every pulse of energy, every fluctuation in light, reveals the rules by which the war has maintained itself. This is not power he must fight. It is logic he must unravel. The battlefield responds to him as he steps closer to the cores. Broken wards react. Collapsing terrain shifts subtly, forming paths that were not there before. Kratos moves with deliberate precision, testing the limits of the system. Spells that once controlled heroes backfire, angles of attack misalign, and towers fail to target him correctly. The war of the ancients is no longer orchestrating the conflict. It is reacting to him, improvising, struggling to maintain the illusion of authority. Every hero watching feels it intuitively. They see that the cycle itself has become fragile, exposed, subject to disruption. Kratos stops just short of the radiant core, the energy shimmering violently, casting erratic shadows across the broken battlefield. He raises the blades of chaos, letting their flames lick the fractured ground, and the Leviathan axe pulses with cold frost, stabilizing the trembling earth beneath him. The two weapons together are more than instruments of destruction. They are extensions of his will, anchors in a world that no longer obeys its own rules. He does not strike yet. He does not need to. The cores flare in recognition of his presence. The war of the ancients acknowledging, perhaps for the first time, that this warrior is not a part of its design. Around him, heroes watch in awe and trepidation. They are no longer participants in a predetermined pattern. They are witnesses to the breaking of inevitability. For the first time, decisions carry weight. Every step, every spell, every movement matters because the system can no longer guarantee repetition. Death, once meaningless, now has permanence. Victory, once illusionary, now requires action, courage, and consequence. Kratos takes a slow, measured step forward, and the battlefield shivers beneath him. The cores react violently, arcs of energy shooting skyward, and the war of the ancients convulses in an attempt to reassert itself. Towers fire indiscriminately, spells cascade, heroes scramble to maintain footing, and the jungle itself seems to writhe with energy. Yet for all its power, the war cannot contain him. He is no longer fighting to win. He is not fighting for radiant or dire. He is fighting to impose reality, to force consequence, to show the system what it means to face finality. Every pulse of energy from the cores threatens collapse, but Kratos advances steadily, unyielding, as if his very presence is a statement. He is here not to destroy for the sake of destruction, but to dismantle the certainty the ancients rely on. Each step cracks the illusion further. Each swing of his blades punctuates the fragility of what they have built. The world quakes in recognition. This is no longer a war of heroes or gods. This is a reckoning. The heroes around him begin to move forward as well, tentatively at first, inspired by his defiance. They take risks, fight decisively, and act independently. The ancients can no longer control them. Every coordinated attack falters because Kratos has introduced unpredictability into a system built on perfect repetition. The battlefield itself begins to fracture in more extreme ways. Fissures opening, energy surging unpredictably, structures destabilizing. The war of the ancients is not ending. It is unraveling. Kratos finally reaches the threshold between himself and the radiant core, a space pulsing with unrelenting energy, and he plants the Leviathan axe into the ground. Frost spreads outward, stabilizing the tremors, anchoring reality just enough to allow deliberate action. He does not strike immediately. Instead, he studies the war like a tactician studies a battlefield, identifying weak points not in walls or towers, but in the logic of the system itself. Every decision of the ancients, every cycle they enforce, every resurrection they command, each has a flaw, and he has come to exploit them. The cores flare violently, light and energy converging into blinding arcs, signaling the war of the ancients' awareness of the challenge before it. It is no longer a battlefield designed for heroism or spectacle. It is a system desperately trying to survive the intrusion of a force it cannot calculate, a warrior it cannot predict, a cycle it cannot perpetuate. Kratos takes a deliberate step forward, and the world responds, the first real test of whether consequence can exist in a place designed to deny it. He is not here to destroy blindly. He is here to teach the world what it has forgotten, that war, without choice, without consequence, without finality, is meaningless. Every pulse of energy from the cores, every arcane defense, every corrupted hero and uncontrolled spell serves to illustrate the one immutable truth Kratos embodies. Cycles can be broken, and the war of the ancients will never be the same again. The battlefield holds its breath. Every hero, every construct, every vestige of power recognizes the enormity of this moment. The war of the ancients has always endured because it denied finality. Now, faced with a warrior who exists beyond its rules, beyond repetition, beyond fear. It faces something new. Kratos raises both blades, the flames and frost dancing in stark contrast, and prepares to confront the very heart of the war itself. The cycle is ready to be broken. The cores react violently to his presence, sending surges of energy across the battlefield that ripple through both radiant and dire forces. Towers shudder, jungle beasts flee, and heroes are thrown off balance by the raw unpredictability of the system. This is no longer controlled chaos. This is a world pushed beyond its design, trembling under the weight of consequence. Kratos does not hesitate. Each step he takes is deliberate, each movement measured, not as an assault, but as a challenge to the very logic that has governed this war for eons. The ancients have relied on repetition to maintain dominance, but repetition cannot predict a warrior who refuses to conform. Heroes begin to follow him, not because they are commanded, but because they see the truth in his actions. Their decisions are no longer dictated by lanes, objectives, or preordained rotations. They fight with awareness, acting to protect, to survive, to test the limits of a world that was never meant to teach them responsibility. Those who hesitated before now step forward, moving independently yet in synchrony, creating openings that even the cores cannot predict. The battlefield has become fluid, alive, a reflection of the choices each combatant makes, rather than the dictates of a system designed for endless repetition. Kratos moves between the flares of chaotic energy, his blades cutting through not just enemies, but the assumptions embedded in every battle. Every strike, every swing, every pivot forces the system to adapt, and adaptation slows the core's relentless rhythm. Spells that were meant to be instantaneous fizzle or misfire. Structures that should react to aggression fail to respond in time. The war of the ancients is learning, recalculating, and struggling to regain stability. But every adjustment is met with foresight and precision. Kratos has become not just a participant, but an active variable the system cannot contain. The heroes around him begin to coordinate in new ways, improvising strategies that defy the patterns the ancients have ingrained. A support hero shields multiple allies simultaneously, anticipating the flow of the battlefield rather than reacting to it. A melee fighter strikes decisively at overextended enemies, breaking formation in ways the system cannot account for. Even heroes who once fought for Radiant or Dire are forced to act independently, their allegiance secondary to survival and understanding. Kratos observes silently, allowing their initiative to flourish, reinforcing the lesson that the war is not eternal because of magic or might, but because the participants have been denied choice. The ancients respond with increasing desperation. Energy flares become erratic, reality bends more violently, and waves of magical backlash ripple unpredictably. Yet even in this chaos, Kratos adapts. He anchors himself with the Leviathan axe, frost spreading through unstable terrain, while the blades of chaos strike with precision that cuts through magical defenses as easily as the battlefield itself. The ancients attempt to overwhelm him, but each surge is countered not merely with strength, but with understanding. He has studied their patterns, identified their flaws, and now uses the battlefield itself against them. As the cores pulse more aggressively, signaling their awareness of the existential threat he poses, Kratos advances steadily toward them. The world quivers in anticipation, every hero, every tower, every lingering minion aware that this moment will redefine the war itself. He does not rush, he does not panic. Each movement is a lesson in patience and consequence, demonstrating to the surviving heroes that the cycle can be broken not with chaos, but with clarity, precision, and unwavering will. The energy from the cores lashes out in arcs of light and shadow, but Kratos meets them with controlled resistance. He does not destroy indiscriminately. He disrupts strategically, severing the flow of power in measured bursts. This is not devastation for its own sake. This is the dismantling of inevitability, showing the war and its participants that permanence exists where choice is exercised. Every pulse he survives, every attack he counters, reinforces the lesson. Cycles are not eternal. Authority is not absolute. Consequence is real. The battlefield feels different now. Heroes no longer look to lanes or towers for guidance. They look to one another and to Kratos, drawing courage from his presence. They fight with awareness, with intention, with consequence in mind. Even the landscape has begun to stabilize around him, responding not to commands, but to deliberate action. The war of the ancients, once a perfect loop of control and repetition, is now fluid, fractured, alive, and vulnerable. Kratos stands before the cores, unyielding, resolute, preparing to deliver the final measure of consequence this world has ever known. The cycle itself waits, holding its breath, as he steps forward. Kratos pauses at the edge of the radiant core, the energy pulsing violently in recognition of his presence. Light fractures into jagged patterns across the battlefield, casting shadows that writhe as if alive. The war of the ancients quivers under the weight of a system being forced to reckon with the impossible. A warrior who cannot be predicted, who cannot be controlled, and who refuses to exist as a variable within its endless loop. Every pulse of energy, every surge of magic, every trembling tower is a question the ancients themselves cannot answer. How did you preserve authority when the one being measured refuses to obey? Around him, heroes watch with bated breath, their exhaustion mingling with awe. Some approach cautiously, stepping into the fractures Kratos has created, testing their own courage against a world that no longer guarantees survival. Others linger on the edges, hesitant to intervene, yet unable to look away. They have seen the war bend beneath one man's will, and they feel the weight of what it means to fight with agency rather than obedience. In the quiet between energy pulses, they realize they are no longer pawns, no longer faceless soldiers following scripts written long before their birth. They are participants in a battle whose stakes are defined not by cycles or respawns, but by consequence. Kratos raises the blades of chaos, flames dancing along the chains, and swings deliberately toward the radiant core. The attack is precise, measured, and symbolic. This is not a strike to destroy indiscriminately, but a strike to disrupt the foundation of control. The core pulses violently in response, and the ground beneath him shudders as if the world itself is screaming. Yet Kratos stands firm. The Leviathan axe rests in his other hand, frost spreading along the cracks in the terrain to stabilize areas that might collapse under the ancients' resistance. Every movement is a lesson in discipline, teaching the heroes that power without understanding achieves nothing. The radiant and dire cores react in tandem, energy spiraling chaotically, creating arcs of unstable light that carve through the battlefield. Towers fire indiscriminately, minions stagger under the pressure, and residual magic lashes unpredictably at anything in its path. The war of the ancients, once a perfect machine of repetition and control, is now exposed, vulnerable to the deliberate choices of a single warrior. Kratos does not falter. He meets every pulse with countermeasure and calculated disruption, forcing the system to react rather than dictate. Heroes begin to step forward, inspired by his defiance. They move with initiative, no longer waiting for instructions or guidance from gods. Spells are cast with foresight, attacks are timed with precision, and defenses are deployed to protect rather than dominate. Even those who once fought blindly for Radiant or Dire find themselves improvising, creating strategies that cannot be predicted. Kratos allows this. He does not command them, but his actions teach them what has been missing: agency, consequence, and responsibility. The cores surge again, stronger and more erratic, signaling the ancients' recognition of the threat Kratos represents. Entire sections of the battlefield convulse under the strain. Towers collapse, jungle paths twist and fracture, and magical wards flare before failing entirely. The system attempts to assert control, but its calculations falter under the weight of true unpredictability. Each attempt to reestablish order only strengthens the lesson. Cycles are not eternal, authority is not absolute, and the war of the ancients is fallible. Kratos steps closer to the dire core, his movements deliberate, his presence commanding without words. Every swing of his blades of chaos, every pulse of frost from the Leviathan axe communicates a singular truth. The war will no longer dictate the terms of existence. Consequence exists now, and it will remain even when the battle is done. Heroes watch and learn, their hesitation replaced by understanding. The cycle has been broken in principle, if not yet in totality. Energy arcs violently between the cores, creating a storm of raw power that threatens to annihilate anything caught in the center. Kratos positions himself strategically, not to survive the storm, but to control its impact, stabilizing the battlefield with every movement. The war of the ancients lashes out, desperate to enforce inevitability, but every pulse is countered with foresight and precision. The system is unraveling, exposed to reality in ways it was never designed to endure. Kratos plants both blades into the fractured earth at the center of the cores, the flames and frost intertwining, anchoring the battlefield and bending the violent energies around him into channels he can manipulate. The heroes step forward with him now, tentative but determined, acting as agents of consequence rather than pawns of the cycle. The war of the ancients struggles to respond, sending waves of energy and summoned champions, but each is met with deflection, strategy, or careful control. This is no longer a fight for dominance. This is a demonstration of what happens when a system designed for inevitability meets a force that refuses to yield. The battlefield quakes as Kratos shifts, energy cascading around him like a tide bending to his will. Every structure, every hero, every lingering effect of the war trembles under the principle he embodies. Cycles can be broken. Authority is not infallible. Consequence is real. Kratos takes a deliberate step closer to the heart of the radiant core, and the battlefield holds its breath, every hero aware that the moment of truth has arrived. The war of the ancients, for all its age and power, must now reckon with a warrior who refuses to exist as part of its machine. The cycle is not yet ended, but its foundations have been shattered. The final confrontation is imminent, and the world itself waits to see if consequence will prevail over endless repetition. Kratos stands at the threshold between the radiant and dire cores. The battlefield stretched out around him like a fractured chessboard. The world quivers beneath the strain of conflicting energies, unstable towers wobbling, minions frozen mid-step, jungle paths twisting unnaturally as the war of the ancients struggles to assert itself. This is no longer a battlefield, it is a proving ground. Every pulse of magic, every surge of energy, every trembling construct is a question the system cannot answer. How do you maintain eternity when the eternal refuses to obey? Kratos does not hesitate. He steps forward deliberately, blades of chaos igniting with fire, Leviathan axe humming with frost, each movement not a strike, but a statement, a declaration that cycles can end and consequence must matter. The cores flare violently in response, casting blinding light across the battlefield. Spells collide unpredictably mid-air, towers misfire, and heroes are tossed from cover to cover as energy arcs across the shattered land. Kratos meets the assault head-on, not with mindless aggression but with understanding. He moves through the chaos with precision, each swing, each strike, each calculated step unraveling the mechanisms of the war. The ancients attempt to overwhelm him, to force him into the patterns they have dictated for millennia, but their logic fails. They are confronting a force they cannot calculate. A warrior who acts with purpose rather than repetition who imposes consequence instead of following cycles. Around him, heroes watch, transfixed. Some move cautiously forward, inspired by his defiance. They step into the chaos, acting independently, improvising strategies that the War of the Ancients cannot anticipate. The battle no longer flows in preordained lanes or obeys predictable respawns. Each hero's choice carries weight. Each action matters. The system that has governed this world for eons is faltering under the pressure of unpredictability, and for the first time, the participants understand what it means to have agency. Victory is no longer guaranteed. Death is no longer meaningless. The world is no longer a loop. It is alive with consequence. Kratos advances to the very center of the radiant core, anchoring himself against the convulsing forces with a Leviathan axe, frost spreading through the fractured ground to stabilize the terrain. Flames from the blades of chaos flicker across the unstable battlefield, burning away illusions and false structures as if to expose the true foundation of the War of the Ancients. The cores pulse violently, arcs of energy shooting skyward, yet he stands firm. He does not strike to destroy indiscriminately. He strikes to disrupt, to dismantle the certainty that has enslaved this world for millennia. Every wave of energy he counters, every pulse he redirects, teaches the surviving heroes a singular lesson. Cycles can be broken, authority is fallible, and consequence is real. The War of the Ancients quakes in recognition of its vulnerability. Towers collapse permanently, jungle paths wither, and summoned forces falter under Kratos' measured defiance. The battlefield, once a perfect machine of repetition, now reacts to choice, adapts to unpredictability, and trembles beneath the weight of consequence. Heroes step forward, emboldened, acting as agents of change rather than pawns of the system. Spells and attacks are coordinated with awareness, not dictated by ancient logic. Each hero feels the gravity of what is unfolding. The war is no longer inevitable. It can be altered, disrupted, and, ultimately, ended. Kratos plants the Leviathan axe into the heart of the radiant core, flames and frost intertwining to anchor the battlefield and bend the violent energy around him into manageable channels. The cores convulse, arcs of light and shadow lashing outward, but the world begins to stabilize. The heroes around him fight not to serve radiant or dire, but to act decisively in a war defined by real consequence. Every action, every choice, every survival now carries meaning. The War of the Ancients trembles because it cannot predict the unpredictable, cannot control the uncontrollable, cannot endure the conscious defiance of a warrior who refuses to be a pawn. Kratos looks across the battlefield, surveying the broken towers, the disrupted lanes, the surviving heroes, and the quivering cores. He does not celebrate. He does not boast. He knows the cost of consequence, the weight of responsibility. He has dismantled the cycle not through destruction alone, but by demonstrating the power of choice, the permanence of action, and the fragility of authority. The War of the Ancients will never be the same. It cannot unsee what has been done. It cannot unlearn the lesson Kratos has imposed. Cycles can be broken, and nothing is inevitable. As the light of the cores dims to a steady pulse, the battlefield falls silent. Heroes lower their weapons, their breaths heavy, their minds racing with understanding. The war continues, but it is no longer a loop. It is no longer a machine. It is a battlefield alive with consequence, shaped by choice, and forever marked by a warrior who refused to bow to inevitability. Kratos turns from the cores, moving through the fractured landscape, his presence a reminder of what has been learned. The heroes follow cautiously, aware that their world is now defined not by cycles, but by their actions. The camera pulls back, showing the shattered battlefield from above, radiant and dire forces scattered, towers in ruins, energy arcs fading, and Kratos walking steadily toward the horizon. The War of the Ancients has been broken, not through conquest, but through defiance, understanding, and unwavering will. The world trembles, but it breathes. The cycle has ended. Before the screen fades to black, one final shot lingers. Kratos standing tall, blades in hand, eyes fixed on the distant cores, a symbol that the impossible is always possible when courage and consequence align. This was not just a battle. This was a reckoning. And the War of the Ancients will never be the same again. Thanks for watching this cross-world journey where Kratos challenges the very foundation of Dota 2's War of the Ancients. If you enjoyed seeing what happens when a warrior transcends cycles and forces consequence into a world built on repetition, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a CrossWorld Gaming what-if scenario. Drop a comment below telling us which hero or universe you'd like to see Kratos clash with next. Let your imagination run wild, because in these worlds, anything is possible.